In Pakistan, whenever a general becomes the chief of the army staff, he just doesn't want to retire. It is such a heady feeling to be not just the army chief, but the boss of the whole country. General Asim Munir is close to retirement, and therefore he has made out his plan to gain an extension as the army chief, as the savior of Pakistan. He gave a most idiotic, blasphemous speech just about a week back, in which he declared civilizational war against India. He talked of a clash of civilization between the Hindus and the Muslim, and how the Pakistani state was the second Riyasat-e-Madina that would teach Islam to the rest of the world, including Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, teach them what Islam was. The simple fact is, where Saudi Arabia, where the United Arab Emirates are trying to modernize, liberalize and create a very good economic future for their people, here is the South Asian brand of Islam led by Mullah Asim Munir, who thinks that the only task of Islam is to wage war all around, wage jihad, wage Ghazwa-e-Hind, have bloodshed, chaos, anarchy, and the economy be damned. Pakistan's economy is in ruins. They can't give 2 square meals a day to their people. No wonder when they kicked out Imran Khan, the enraged population of Punjab and Pakhtunkhwa was on the streets of Lahore, Islamabad, Rawalpindi, etc. They ransacked the house of the corps commander, ate his white peacocks, for dinner. They opened his fridge and took out the Kraft cheese and all the exotic fruits that were stored there. That is a very great warning sign for Pakistan, the reality of Pakistan. The simple fact is that General Asim Munir gave the threat of a civilizational war, and a week later his minions, the terrorists of his cartoon networks, they staged the communal carnage of Pahalgam. Carnage of Pahalgam. It is now understood, it is now being reported that the terrorists were talking of a plan A, and that plan was to kill at least 150 or more Indian Hindus, right? 150 or more Indian Hindus. And then they said that the brakes have been applied, and the target now was to kill about 35 Hindus, because it felt that would keep the Indian response manageable, that the Indians would cry foul, murder, this and that, and calm down and take it on the chin like they had been taking it earlier. So the plan was pared down. The ultimate casualty toll was 28 killed and 15 wounded. And I hope and pray more of the wounded have not succumbed. I hope they have pulled out. But this carnage was adequate to inflame anger in the whole of India. The whole of India. Prime Minister Modi was in Saudi Arabia. He rushed back. There was a 2.5 hours national meeting of the Cabinet Committee on Security, and at the end of it, the Indian government adopted a whole of the government approach and spelled out a slew of economic warfare measures, diplomatic pressure measures, and made the announcement of the abrogation of the Indus Water Treaty till Pakistan behaves, right? Abrogation of the Indus Water Treaty, which sent shock waves. This was unprecedented. Remember, during the 65 war, 71 war, Kargil, nobody had touched the Indus Water Treaty, and the water continued to flow even as blood was spilt on the borders and inside our borders. We continued to let the water flow in an act of generosity which was slightly surprising, right? Now the Indian government has put the clamps on, right? These are the diplomatic pressure measures. These are the economic warfare pressure measures which have sent shock waves in Pakistan and even around the world. The very next day, Prime Minister Modi, while giving a speech in Bihar, read out the Riot Act to Pakistan. He said that those who perpetrated this massacre would be dealt with, and not only they, but their handlers across the borders would also be made to pay. Right? He said that the Pakistan would suffer unimaginable consequences. If you study the phraseology and compare it to his speech just before Balakot, this was far harsher in tone and content. Far harsher in tone and content. And just to ensure that nobody missed the import of what he was saying, right? He read out the Riot Act in English, so that the international audience would also get the message. That is the level of resolve that has been shown, and from the Prime Minister's speech, it is clear that in addition to the economic warfare measures, in addition to the diplomatic pressure, India will also mount kinetic military operations to impose deterrence by punishment. Deterrence by punishment. Look, let me explain. In 2016, we had retaliated across the line of control with the surgical strikes. Our special forces had gone across 2 to 4 kilometers deep, killed 40 terrorists as they were sleeping in their launch pads. Right? And they came back the next day without a scratch. For a few months, Pakistan was sobered up and quiet. Then it started, the effect wore off, and it started the chulbuli again. 2019, it staged the Pulwama massacre. And India retaliated 12 days later with the Balakot air strikes. The Balakot air strikes killed about 200 Pakistanis in a remote terrorist training camp. Unfortunate problem was that it was so remote that there were no cameras around to record it, no civilian press, no witnesses. So Pakistan could try and use the escape clause ki nothing happened. India has only killed crows, pigeons, sparrows and some other species of birds. The point that I want to make is that both surgical strike, air strike, Balakot air strike were strategic signaling being done by the government of India to Pakistan and the rest of the world. The strategic signaling said thus far and no further. Right? The strategic signaling said this is a shot across the bow. We can do worse. Unfortunately, for about 2 years after Balakot, Pakistan was absolutely quiet. It did nothing when we removed Article 370 and Article 56, the clause 56. It was absolutely quiet as a lamb. It just took it lying down. But then it went crying to its Aka in Beijing, Mere Aka Mujhe Bachao Vagera, and China staged the Ladakh intrusion, purportedly to take pressure off Pakistan. But China also miscalculated, and the strong response given by India, mirror imaging the Chinese deployments, tank for tank, gun for gun, soldier for soldier, and more, you see, shook China up and sobered China down. China has thereafter been asking for a thaw, because China today is engaged with Taiwan in the South China Sea. It is almost facing an undeclared tariff war with the United States, and it is in not any mood to have a digression on its eastern flank, on its western flank, when its eastern flank is on fire, when Taiwan is on the boil. It would make considerable strategic sense for China to keep out of any fracas in South Asia and not activate two fronts at the same time. That is strategic common sense. So I am not sure if China would react, but we'll have to wait and watch. We'll have to wait and watch, and that will dictate our further response to Chinese, measures for a thaw or otherwise peace proposal. It would be very nice if they get the message and if they are prepared to calm down. But if they help Pakistan in this, and they so far have condemned this attack, we'll have to see, carefully watch China's reactions. So how will India respond? India will respond with a multiplicity of means, overt and covert combination. It will not confine itself to one category of action, you see, as kind of an exploratory measure. That those were strategic signaling. They were strategic shots across the bow. Now we want to aim for deterrence by punishment, deterrence by imposing costs and consequences. For that, like I said, it would be a whole of the government approach. It would be use a multiplicity of means. We will use, I am very certain, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, which can all do significant damage to Pakistan. Pakistan is in sheer panic, right? Let me tell you one fact. Asim Munir had gone to Kazakhstan. These visits of the Army Chief of Pakistan in summer, he's always taken to cool places for a kind of a holiday in the terms of a state visit by the Pakistani Army Chief, etc. He came rushing back. He came rushing back, and the first order he gave was that the combat jets in Skardu should be shifted from Karachi and sent to the Skardu airfield, which is in POK, Gilgit-Baltistan, where he was terrified that India would now take POK back. Use this as an excuse to take back POK. And he emptied Karachi. He forgot that the Indian Navy at that very time, its aircraft carrier was in the Arabian Sea, its missile destroyers, missile frigates were out in the Arabian Sea, possibly its submarines armed with club cruise missiles, etc., and its warships equipped with 400-kilometer range BrahMos cruise missiles are out there in the Arabian Sea. And don't forget, in 1971, the Indian Navy had created havoc in Karachi. Havoc. So we could repeat that. We could impose blockade, temporary, partial. I mean, there is a whole range of options. We have a very powerful Air Force. In 2019, it did not have the Rafales. In 2019, it did not have the S-400s. And it did not have the Astra BVR, Beyond Visual Range missiles. We have it all now. And Pakistan knows it. And therefore, no wonder Pakistan is in a panic. When Asim Munir came back, his Air Force chief told him that his Air Force was just not ready. 50% of his F-16s were unserviceable. And they had to do a lot of work to get them back in fighting shape. 50% of the radars on his JF-17 fleet were not working. 50% radars. The Pakistanis are quite upset with the Chinese JF-17 fighters. It is learnt that they have asked in panic China for J-10C aircraft, which are F-16 equivalents, right? Copies of the Kefir Israeli fighter. They've asked China for those aircraft, right? They've asked China for HQ-19 surface-to-air missiles, which are supposed to be equivalents of the S-400. Pakistan Air Force is terrified, and rightly so. They are sweating, right? Pakistan is in panic, trying to second guess what India will do, right? Let them stew in their juice. If General Asim Munir has high blood pressure, if Mullah Asim Munir has low back ache, worrying about what, when and where and how India will strike, it's all for the good. He asked for it. He declared a civilizational war. He declared a civilizational war against India, and he will have to reap the whirlwind. As you sow, so shall you reap. If you are feeling nervous and the Pakistanis are saying, oh, it hasn't happened, wait and watch. Wait and watch. We have a very powerful Navy, a very strong Air Force, and the second largest army in the world. We have very competent service chiefs. General Upendra Dwivedi is an infantryman, he is a combat veteran, he spent decades in the Northern Command. The Navy chief is a towering personality, a very aggressive naval commander, and I'm sure the Navy can do wonders. We have a very outspoken, straightforward air chief who doesn't mince his words, and you will not find him wanting in action. I'm very sure they'll come up with a perfect plan to impose deterrent punishment on Pakistan. They'll be prepared to go up the escalation ladder as many steps as Pakistan wants, and Pakistan will then be forced to think of the consequences of initiating the next terror strike in India. It will have to weigh the costs very carefully, very deliberately. Right? The one factor that I want to mention is, even if there is a limited war, one fact is certain: the Pakistani army, hovering on the brink of collapse, will collapse, will be flushed down the tube of history, even as the Soviet economy was in 1990. It will be flushed down the tube of history. Whatever the outcome of the military conflict, one certainty is that Pakistan's economy will go bust. And if India also ratchets up the pressure of economic warfare, either by, which it has done by the abrogation of the Indus Water Treaty, and we also could have a partial, total blockade, that is for the armed forces and the government to decide, but we will be seeing the outcome of Pakistan provocation, serious provocation, in days. Jai Bharat, Jai Hind.